Let's start taking a look at the music editor. And I'm going to select this organ instrument part, and I'm going to hit F2, and it opens it up, and I can double click that as well. And let's take a look. Now, we can resize this by clicking and dragging, but we can also double click right on the divider line, and that'll maximize it, and then double click again, and it'll minimize it right down there. So let's maximize it for the moment and look at the different parts. I'm just going to hide this. We have a track list where we can select what track we want to view based on these dots. We can view multiple tracks together, and then which track we want to edit based on the pencil. So let's just go back to the organ track where we're viewing it and editing it. And I'm just going to close that for the moment. Now we can switch the display between three different views. Right now we're in keyboard view over there, or piano view. And then we have drum view for when we're working with drum parts. We'll look at that separately. And then new in Studio 1.5, we have score view for notation style editing and note creation. So let's focus on piano view for the moment. Now, as with the audio editor, all these tools and settings and time base and snap and quantize are independent from the arrange view. And we have a new form of snapping and quantizing, and that's scale snap. So we can enable a scale snap so that the notes, when we move them, are going to conform to notes of a particular key or scale. So for example, this little beat that I'm putting together is in G minor. So I'm going to select my root note here as G, and then I can choose from different scales and modes. And I'm going to choose Dorian mode since it's kind of a G minor 7. So now I can click here and enable the scale snap, and we see little blue lines underneath the notes that conform to that key, and in this case, mode. So let me zoom a little bit. I can use the W key, and I can use E for that direction, and Shift like that, just as we do in arrange view. Now we can simply, with the arrow key here, and you'll notice here we don't have this kind of smart tool, we have the independent tools. With the arrow key, we can do all the basic operations. We can drag a note up and down. I'm going to hit undo. And we can move left and right. And you'll see it's snapping based on the snap settings. Sort of like a magnet snapping, in this case, to 16th notes, since this is set to follow a quantized setting, and the quantized is at 16ths. And we can also resize notes by moving the cursor to the end, and they also snap, and we can easily override that with the Shift key, of course. And we can resize from either end. We can actually resize the parts themselves because we're working within a part here. Let me just pull this down, and you can see that we're within a part. But if I go to the end, either the beginning or the end, but the end, I can get a little resize tool here and actually resize the part. You can see it reflected here in the arrange view. So again, I'll just bring this back. And let's go back to the beginning. Now we can double click with the arrow tool to create notes, and a simple double click will create a note, and it's based on the quantized setting. So in this case, we can see that it's a 16th note, and we see it conforms to this grid. We can double click with the arrow tool, and that'll erase a note. We can also hold the command key down, and that toggles an eraser tool like that. I'm just going to undo. And we can hold down the option key to resize two adjacent notes. So this is interesting. Let's say I've got these two notes butted up against each other like that. I'm going to zoom a little bit. There we go. I can hold down Option and resize the two. I'm going to add Shift so we're free of the grid, but I'm resizing both of the notes. And without any modifier, it'll just resize one of them, but it acts as a kind of junction tool to resize both of them. We can resize multiple notes all at once. So I'm going to select multiple notes, and there's a couple of different functions we can do. I can use Command after a short drag, and that'll snap the length of all notes to match the length of the one I click. So let's say I want them all to be this length. I'm going to grab it and hold down Command, and now they all go to that length, so I can resize them all together. I'm going to hit undo. Another thing we can do is hold down Alt with the Command key, and that's Control on Windows. And with that, we drag the ends, and it'll make all the ends of the notes end at the same time. So for example, let's say I have these three notes here, and I want them all to end at the same time. I'm going to select them and grab them with Command Alt, and they all snap to be the same end position. Now let's look briefly at the split tool, which is this one, and we get it with number 2. It's got an interesting extra kind of hidden function. First, we can click, and as we know, it'll split the notes as we would expect. I'll just hit undo for the moment. But what we can do is hold down Alt or Option as we click, and it'll also split the part in that place. So if I Option click, I've actually created two parts. And if we look here, you can see that there's a little split here in the part. I'm going to hit undo, and they're just healed, and it's one long part now. Now, the paint tool is the really powerful tool in this piano view. I'm going to hit 1 to go back to the arrow, and we can always hold down Command. And you saw that I toggled the erase tool to erase the note, but it actually toggles the pencil tool, which when we hover over note turns into the eraser. But we can toggle the pencil with the Command key, or we can, of course, press 3 and get it. So there's several things we can do here. We can, of course, just click and draw in a note. And again, it's based on the quantized setting. I'm going to just undo it by clicking with the eraser tool. But we can click and drag and then resize the note as we're creating it, and it's snapping to grid. I'm going to hold down Shift, and then it's free like that. Again, I'm just going to click there to get rid of it. Now, we can also drag up and down to determine velocity as we're creating it. So you'll see the colored bar inside adjusting for the velocity as I drag up and down. So a nice way to create notes of a specific velocity. I'm going to delete it for the moment. We can also use the paint tool on already existing notes. If we go to the edge, it becomes the resize tool, like we got with the arrow, and same thing with the right edge. And if we hold down Alt, we can edit the velocity of notes, all with the paint tool. And you see the visual representation of that inside the note. Now, we can hold down Alt while we're painting in to create multiple notes, and that's based on the line drawing mode. And we get to that from under here. We'll look at that in more detail when we're looking at automation. But for now, I can hold down Alt, and it's creating several notes. Now, we can even use the paint tool to create a new part while we're in this edit view. Let me go to the end here. And we're in an empty spot in the timeline now. Let me just zoom. We're at bar 17 here, and there's nothing there. So I can use this to just click and drag and create a new part of the length I want. And you can see it there reflected in the arrange view. And when we're working with the paint tool, we can always use the Command key to toggle it with the arrow tool. So between the arrow tool and holding Command to toggle paint, and then you get the erase tool when you hover over the note, or using the paint tool and then holding Command to toggle the arrow, you can basically do just about all your relevant note creation and editing with those two tools. We'll continue with more in the next video.